First of all, I guess in advance, I owe you an apology. I was actually not supposed to be the one presenting today. Our vice president of marketing was, but unfortunately, he had a personal thing come up. I just flew in last night, so I hadn't planned on doing this, but here I am. So, one of the things that I'm going to slightly deviate from, one of the things that problems we've been having is we didn't particularly have a focus with the company, because what we're doing is we're making a form of artificial intelligence, which is a behavioral-based artificial intelligence, which is different from a data-based artificial intelligence. And one of the things we've been encountering is a lot of the industries that it was applicable to. For example, I'm up in North Dakota, so that's where I am. Drones was one thing we had talked about up there, and agriculture. They were the two big industries in North Dakota where I am that we've been talking about the artificial intelligence, but we're kind of finding out nobody really cared. So the original plan for the company was at one point in 3 years is to get to something we had called the shadow, which deals with, something that'll deal with drug addiction, personal wellness, and things like that. I'll give you a little background. Last week, Tuesday, I was in Bismarck, North Dakota for a governor's conference on Recovery Reinvented. And there was 800 people attended this conference. I could not believe how many people were in recovery at this conference. They actually had people stand up and say, basically, how long you're in recovery, and they would sit down to see who was in recovery the longest. One woman had been in recovery for 52 years. I couldn't believe it when I heard that. In North Dakota, the opioid epidemic is soaring up there. Now, I know it's not comparable to Texas. There's a lot less people. Last year in North Dakota, they had 15 people that OD'd on opioids. This year, they're already at 65, and it's growing rapidly. The amount of methamphetamine use in North Dakota is skyrocketing. And I would imagine it's the same thing in every other state. From what I've seen, this is, I think they just said over 66,000 people a year die of drug overdoses. So what we decided is we basically need to get to the concept of why this business was set up in the first place. The ultimate goal of this business wasn't to do agriculture and wasn't to do autonomous drones. It was basically to create something called the shadow, which was to help with drug addiction. We've talked to numerous drug counselors or drug people involved in the industry in Grand Forks, Fargo, and some in Dallas. And the overwhelming feeling was they're tired of same old, same old. We got to have some outside the box thinking here. So one concept that we had come up with, a concept called the shadow, is a concept called the shadow. Basically what it is, it's a cyber you is what it is. Just a little background on the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence models behavior. Data-driven intelligence models the data. So in a case of a data-driven AI, it's only as good as what people put into it. Whereas behavior, the individual cells model the behavior. So think of it as modeling the ant versus the anthill. Anyway, getting back to the shadow. What our concept is to have people to interact with their particular shadow. It's basically a lockdown cyber version of you. It'd be the same as when you were 10 years old writing a diary, little Johnny broke up with me, I'm so upset. Your personal feelings and thoughts are being transferred to this. If you've got any kind of problems, like be it drug addiction, alcoholism, or it could actually also apply to depression. I actually had a meeting with a company in North Dakota called SAD. They're attempting to work with youth on cyberbullying, anorexia, things like that. That people, and this includes kids, tend to be most honest or share their thoughts when they're by themselves. So this becomes like the invisible friend that you had when you were a kid that you interact with, but it's recording it. So if you do seek help and decide, look, I have a problem, I need help, or theoretically, if you're a minor, if your parents decide that you need help, a specialist can basically unlock the shadow and find out what kind of thoughts or feelings you're actually storing. Because one of the problems that came up over and over again talking to counselors, especially in Grand Forks and Fargo, is when people come in, they do their interviews, their comprehensives, they can't get an accurate picture of it, because I'm from Miami. Believe me, I know a lot of drug addicts who are paranoid people that don't want to share anything with anybody. So you can get a true picture of the person you're actually dealing with. That way, for example, if I'm a raging crack addict and you're a raging crack addict, we're two different people. We are not going to respond to the same treatment. They need more information that will basically allow them to tailor the treatment program to give the person the best chance for recovery. And after attending that conference, I can honestly say that listening to the speeches, it's kind of heartbreaking in some cases, stimulating some others. The one I do remember is Carlos Rivera. He was from the White Bison Indian tribe in northern North Dakota. And basically what he said is once he got clean and sober, he started looking at people for similarities instead of differences. He said that was a beautiful thing. I think with all the crap that's going on right now, how apropos that is. So that's pretty much all I had. She hold up 1 minute here. I didn't want to get too technical because I keep losing people when I get really technical on the AI.
Thanks, Dean. That was awesome. I was definitely expecting something very technical, so this was educational for me. We talked about this when I was in Fargo. I talked with my partners down here on Sunday, and this is what we wanted to talk about. Unfortunately, the person who was supposed to be here also had the correct PowerPoint with him. So I just said I wanted to talk about what we truly, truly are trying to do. And after attending that conference in Bismarck, I kind of walked out of there thinking this is what I'm going to talk about, and this is what we wanted to reflect in the presentation today. Well, thanks for doing that. We'll start our Q&A, and we do have 14 minutes again, so I think this is going to be great.
What's your business model? I mean, I heard a lot of support and a lot of sympathy activities, but I didn't hear any business model.
You mean like our target market, or who are?
How do you charge?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I gotcha. Okay. The AI is actually applicable to many other things. Our business model was, as we created the AI, it could be used for, I'm going to call them simple things. I don't know a better way of putting it, like the drones, like the drones in the agriculture. The business model was basically to sell subscriptions where we could get terabytes or data and process it with the algorithms and send back the answer. So in the case of businesses, and I heard this in ag repeatedly, they've got terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of information they can't process. So if it comes through the portal, we can process it through the artificial intelligence and the DAM. With regards to what I was talking about, the drug addiction, we were just talking about this on Sunday. One of the models is we were going to create something like a chat room through the portal, but it has to remain anonymous, and then charge like $4.95, $5.95 for this anonymous chat room, and possibly working with people in the wellness industry, basically support it. Because if it's, I would think there's one of the things we already approached is Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Dakota, and they were interested. They said, okay, if people are actually sharing some medical history, like for example, one of the things, and I realize I didn't talk about this, is a Fitbit type thing that records all your medical information, and that can actually be downloaded in the AI, and it's taken as a wellness. You can check your blood pressure. If you are diabetic, you can get your insulin. You can get your insulin right through it. So basically, it's to sell subscriptions to the portal for data information to come through, or for chat rooms to be in.
So, Dean, do you have a product today if someone wanted to engage with it, even on test purposes?
Yes, one of the things we've got is a proprietary item called it's called the DAM. It's basically right now it processes the data in real time. One of the things we did is we took existing tools, rearranged them, and we eliminated data warehousing and data storage completely. There's a company in Plano that one of my partners used to work at, and basically after he did it and he tested it, there'd be no need for the data warehouse, data storage, because processed data is in a different form and is stored differently. I mean, how many times did you have it where you'd run a computer program and say, we need to run a report, says I'll be at lunch because an hour later it'll be done running, because it's got to figure out where the data is. In a process form, it comes back. That is actually the foundation for the AI. And it's all locked down. So as the terabytes of information or data comes in, through the artificial intelligence and through the DAM, it's processed in near real time and sent back.
Just, and one other thing, with the drones, for example, or the ag, that could be up and running in about 4 months, depending on what business wanted it.
Thanks for your presentation. I just had another question about the shadow. So I'm trying to understand, so what exactly does that experience of interacting with the shadow look like, or what's that mean for the end user if they're using that application?
What was the last part again? Sorry.
What's that mean for the end user using this application? So the shadow, I'm not entirely sure what it is and what that experience looks like for the user.
Good, I get to explain it in more detail. What it basically is, it's actually a cyber version of you. Use a type of vessel. Now, one thing we're still trying to play with, an Apple Watch is one possibility, an app on a phone is another. And basically, you are interacting with it. I think going back to the Fitbit watch, that's probably our best example. Basically, the shadow, which is basically the group of AIs put together. I'm going to use a car as an example, an autonomous car. Each part of the car has its own AI. So as the AIs are put together, it becomes a stronger network because it's all interacting together. Because the AI is more of it's a bottom-up theory. The bottom level being the behavior, and then it just moves up. So what you're doing is you're interacting with the shadow. It's basically all recording a lot of your medical. It's recording your vitals off the Fitbit, which is something we actually just came up with about 2 weeks ago. And we also would have your medical information put in there. Because one of the things is with the bioinformatics, if you have a predisposition to a disease and it's in the DNA, we'd kind of like to know it then and not 10 years from now. So getting back to interacting with the shadow, basically it's something that if it's given to you, you have to have 100% complete trust with it. You're the only one that can access the shadow. I can't get to your shadow. He can't get to your shadow. Nobody can get to it. It's locked down. It's something you're interacting on a daily basis. I catch myself doing this in the car. Oh, I wish I'd have done this, or I wish I'd have done that, or I should have called my mom. And those are more rudimentary examples. But as you interact with it, it basically processes your feelings, your emotions, and it changes it into behavior data. So as this collects it over a period of time, it basically gets a kind of a cyber picture of who you are. So if you do seek help for either psychological or drug addiction, you have to give permission to the person who's a specialist to get inside the shadow and see how you're exactly made up. Because like I said, one of the problems is with the comprehensive the interview is people aren't truly exposing who they are and what their problems are. In the case of the shadow, if you had molestation as a kid, if you had a history of family drinking, chances are at some point you've expressed, if you trust your shadow, like I said, this is based on you trusting that you can interact with this shadow, that information is going to be in there because at some point you're going to talk about it. And then if you do seek help with a specialist, the specialist now gets a more accurate picture of who you are based on this and come up with a better system or something, what's the word I'm looking for, a treatment program that will actually work for you. That answer the question at all? Okay.
So Dean, I had a similar question to Tim. So when I'm thinking about the shadow, there's a couple of things you've talked about. You talked about the drone and we talked about the Fitbit. Is it a wearable technology as well as a dashboard? Do you input information into it, or does it just knowingly collect those specific data points for you based on your emotions, your heart rate, et cetera?
Okay. The drone is something separate from the shadow.
Okay.
One of the things that I had a problem with is, like I said, there are more simplistic uses for the artificial intelligence. The most advanced one is the shadow, which you're basically modeling the human being, which that's still 3 to 5 years off.
So is that a dashboard or is that a wearable or a combination?
It's actually, the information is actually transferred through like through a wearable or a phone app. We're actually working with both. So it actually was a shadow. With the case of the drone, one of the things we had tried to convey to people is there's simply uses for the AI. In the case of the drone going over an ag field, if the artificial intelligence has had data put in for 250 different types of weeds, the drone flies over and it spots one, or takes a picture of one that is unidentifiable, it's considered an outlier because it's not in there. So basically the information would come back to the portal, we have an outlier here. You've got 250 different types of weeds here, we don't recognize this particular one. So it finds the anomaly and it basically reports back. It's kind of similar, it's a more simplistic use, and we can actually use the AI for different things as we progress to the shadow. The shadow is the most complicated. Where we ran into a little bit of problem is
The uses for the AI and the dam, like the drones and the cars and some of the other things I've been talking about, we didn't see a lot of interest in it. When we started talking about our ultimate goal in 3 to 5 years of the shadow helping with addiction, things like that, that's where all the interest came.
So this shadow that you have, if somebody was to put in, I don't know, mention how they're feeling or what they're going to do, or let's say that somebody has a drug addiction and they say, I'm thinking about abusing or using again. Would the shadow then mimic, like show them like, well, this is kind of what your life is going to turn out to be if you go down this course, or if you're saying I'm using again and all of a sudden this healthy shadow becomes unhealthy? Or I guess I'm not quite, or you just collecting that data?
We were actually headed down that road. We were actually, we hadn't really talked about that per se, but when it came to collecting information on your health and wellness, if, for example, you're showing symptoms of, let's see, of high blood pressure, your cholesterol's up, that you could actually, yes, interact with the shadow, and the shadow would basically inform you that, hey, there's a problem, or your cholesterol's high, your blood pressure's high, you need to have something this to checked out. Yes, that we hadn't talked about that per se, but that was something we just brushed over the other day, where yes, something like that could in fact happen, because basically you are going to be interacting with. In fact, like I said, we're not there yet. It's about 3 years off what we're looking at. But in actuality, if you pass on to the next plane, theoretically your cyber shadow is left behind. So there's actually a cyber you still out there.
I look at, like the Wii, and you create your own little character based on your height, weight, et cetera. And if you continue to use that, that character can change. And so what I'm asking, like the shadow, even if, let's say, I know you mentioned drug and alcohol use and whatever else, but let's say someone's on the road to recovery and your Fitbit, I'm wearing one, is tracking that. I'm walking 12,000 steps. Would the shadow be able to, or is this something on your roadmap that if I wanted to click and say, hey, if I continue this path, what will I look like in 3 months, or what kind of data, because I'm doing this, will your heart rate's going to be better, you're going to look more like this? Is it going to kind of show like a future self of me? Or
The answer to your question is yes, because that was on our path, that through the wellness, that as the artificial intelligence basically processed, it would be the same thing with sales. If you were in a business and you were trying to project how many sales you're going to have in 2021, the artificial intelligence would take all the factors, everything that's out there, all the data, and basically say, okay, with 95% certainty, based on all these contributing factors, this is where we believe sales will be in 21. Same general principle. Based on these factors of you exercising, your blood pressure doing this, and this, this is where we project with 99% certainty where your body will be in a year, 18 months, things like that, yeah.
So, Dean, I have the last question. What can we as a community do to help you in your business? Now and as you look out, it sounds like you're more heavily focused on the 5-year roadmap with your shadow, but if you can give us some ideas of how we can be helpful today, that would be great.
Okay. We are looking for seed funding to get to where we want to be. We were actually in front of investors probably about 6 weeks ago, and one of the things we were trying to convey to them is, as we develop the artificial intelligence, now mind you, the shadow is still about 3 to 4 years off, we figure, but as we develop the artificial intelligence, there's certain other industries we can either sell a subscription or deal, or I don't want to say sell, or implement, that's a better word, implement the artificial intelligence as we go along. For example, the drones in the agriculture, that could be ready in 6 to 8 months, because it's a fairly simple use, because some of them some require less AIs. For example, a drone does not really have that many parts, truthfully, because God knows I've seen enough drones in the last couple months. So as the AIs work together, we could have 100% autonomous drones as long as it knows the mission where it's going to fly. We even set it up with a drone farm where each drone could be asked, can you fly the mission? Where are you on your parts to be changed out, things like that. And whichever drone can actually do the mission can actually do it. So there's other things that we could actually use it for on the way too. But the shadow is actually the end use. But we are looking for seed funding to basically to get it going, because the designer of it right now is kind of tied up in a no-compete contract, and I can't really do anything while he's tied up, because it would be his company's intellectual property, or that company's intellectual property, if we move forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We appreciate your presentation.